Okay, so I just completed my first day of my field experience at Quarter Mile Lane Elementary School in Bridgeton. My cooperating teacher's name is Mrs. Trainer. I'm in a kindergarten class with another student from our class, Brooke Coskery. The class has 15 students in it. It's an inclusion class, so there are 5 students who are classified. So because of that, there's a special ed teacher in the classroom at all times. Her name is Mrs. Perna. We also have an aide who helps out. Her name is Mrs. Tupper. And there's also a student teacher in our classroom with us from Rowan. So there's 6 adults in the classroom total. So that was a lot for the kids to take in when we got there. So basically, I'm just going to go through our whole day, what we did, and then I'll go through the bullet points for like the blog topics. So when we got there, they have their morning routine. The kids eat breakfast, and then they all gather on the carpet for classroom attendance, and they use a smartboard. Each student drags their name from one column to the other, from at home to at school. Then with the teacher, they go through the calendar, what day of the week it is, what month, what date, and then they go through the weather. Mrs. Trainer has the students look outside to see if it's sunny or cloudy or rainy, and then they decide on what the weather's like outside. Then they go over their letter sounds. They go through all the letters that they've learned up to this point. And then they also practice on blending, and they make up words. And this is all using the smartboard. After the morning routine, they go into small groups. These are basically their literacy centers. There's 3 different groups, and they are broken up into advanced readers, average readers, and lower level readers, below level readers. There's a group that Mrs. Trainer has, Mrs. Perna has a group, and so does Mrs. Tupper. Mrs. Trainer's group drew pictures, and then each student had to write 2 sentences about what they drew in their journal. Each group has about 4 to 5 students in it, so they're small groups. Mrs. Perna's group worked on letter sounds and blending. They used their sight word of the day. They would do an arm tap, and then they would write their sight word in the air. And then they would use, I thought this was interesting, they used a tactile grid. They put it under their paper to write the word, so that I asked Mrs. Perna what that was for, and she said it was a sensory thing that they could feel writing the word. And then after they wrote it on the grid, they would write a sentence using the word. And then they would pound out the sentence before they wrote it. Mrs. Tupper's group cut out letters and glued them into boxes to complete words on the worksheet. The worksheet was called middle sound. So they would cut out the letters, and that letter would be the middle sound that's missing to each word that was on the worksheet. After small groups, they went into centers. They could choose their centers, so that allowed for student choice. There were centers such as technology, science, art, blocks, and there's also a center that you could go to. It had a little kitchen and baby dolls, so it's more home living. After centers, they had snack. They ate a quick apple. Each of them got an apple and had snack. After snack was math. And again, there were 3 small groups. Everything pretty much is taught in smaller groups. Mrs. Trainer said that she really likes that approach, and it's easier to make sure everyone is on track and doing what they're supposed to be doing and learning what they need to learn. So there's an advanced group, an average group, and a low group, just like there was with the literacy centers. In Mrs. Trainer's group, the students were counting cubes, and in Mrs. Tupper's group, they were doing a numbers worksheet. So I think they were working one group was working on the number 13, and then the advanced group had moved up to the number 14. So they're working on tracing that and how you make 14 and how you can add numbers to get to 14. And then Mrs. Perna's group was using dominoes to add numbers together. And they were focusing on like base 10, so if it was 14, they would have the base 10, and then they would know that was 10, and then they would count up to 4, so 11, 12, 13, 14 to get to 14. After math was lunch, and they had recess. After recess was social studies. I thought that was very interesting. Because it's Black History Month, Mrs. Trainer chose to read them an African folk tale. It was called "Why Mosquitoes Buzz in People's Ears." It was a cute book for kindergarten. Then Mrs. Trainer did an activity with the students after that. But before she did the activity, Mrs. Trainer kept checking while she was reading the book. She kept pausing to ask the students questions to make sure that they were understanding what they were reading. So she would pause and ask questions to check for comprehension, which I thought was neat to see because we talk about it in class all the time, and it's neat to actually see it in the field being used. When she was done reading the story, she reviewed the story and the characters and the storyline, and asked the students, what type of characters were there, what happened, this and that. And then the activity that she did after the book was she had the students color a map of Africa, and she had the students color in the rainforest, where the areas where rainforests are located. After social studies was art, the art teacher came to the classroom, and then what I thought was neat, the students they have a book exchange at the end of every day. They use the American Reading Company. That was for their guided reading. Mrs. Trainer said it was an older program that they have, but she still likes the books that they have. So the books are leveled by color. The lowest level is yellow. Every student starts at yellow, and then as they progress, they move up to green and then blue. They're doing an incentive where if each student reads 10 books a month, they put it on their log, and then they get, I think Mrs. Trainer said it was a Pizza Hut coupon at the end of each month, which is nice. They also have a program in place for motivation. It's called Bucket Fillers. Each adult in the room picks one student who worked very well throughout the day. Mrs. Trainer said they usually do this every day, so at the end of the day, each adult announces who won the bucket fillers, and whoever won goes and picks out a little prize from a bucket full of goodies that Mrs. Trainer has. And then after that is dismissal. I think I hit a lot of the blog topics throughout the day, but the physical aspects of the room, there are multiple small, round desks, round tables where 3 or 4 students sit at each table. There's about 4 of those. There is a lot of decoration all around the classroom. It's very kid-friendly. Mrs. Perna has a kidney table desk, and there is a carpet right by the smartboard for reading time and circle time and any group activity. There is some of the students use PECs. I had learned about those in one of my special education courses, so I thought that was interesting. And then there's a kidney table in the back of the classroom that Mrs. Trainer uses a lot for her, just like her desk. She doesn't really have a desk because there's so little space and so much that the students need to access. There's 4 computers in the classroom that the students can use. There's another rug for story time. It has, it's more of like their literacy area. There's a bunch of books and bookshelves. And let's see, classroom climate management. I had mentioned that they work in small groups to teach instruction. Components of literacy, I talked about the literacy centers and the guided reading program that they exchange books at the end. I mentioned small group, work. And as for best practices, by doing the small groups and having the low, average, and then high groups, Mrs. Trainer's already kind of scaffolding that in itself, and it also incorporates differentiation. So, for the lower group, you're going to teach differently than you would to the higher group. And for student choice, students got to choose their centers. I was observing the students throughout the day, and I have a few students in mind who I would like to work with for our interview and tutoring and interest inventory. And we also talked to our cooperating teacher and exchanged contact information. But other than that, it was a great first day in the field, and I look forward to going next week.